All right, now before we continue the project, it's important that we understand like how we want to build from even the back end. How do we want to proceed in building the back end? So what the way I would like to start is, since we already have experience interacting with MongoDB database, in other words, creating a CRUD application, an application where you have the functionality of creating, read, update, and delete. I would like us to start from the authentication aspect of the project. In other words, the part of the project that enables user to log in, register, log out, and stuff like that. So there are some data that we need for that to be able to, proceed smoothly. So let me come to the profile. In our profile, you see here that we have this information about the user's profile. So at least when we want to store our information in MongoDB, these are the fields that we're going to store, so including the image as well. Okay, great. Now that we have that out of the way, let's let's come here and, okay, I think this is distracting. Let me just come here and expand the Visual Studio Code. Great. So in our models, remember, when we want to interact with MongoDB, we have to create a model, which is the way we structure our data that's going to be stored in MongoDB. So in our model, I'm going to create a model for the user. I'll click on this model and then I'll create a new file. That file is going to be called user model.js, and then I'll just hit enter on that. Now for us to create that model, remember we installed Mongoose, and like I said, it's a package that helps us easily interact with MongoDB. So I'm going to import Mongoose here. I'll say const, and I think subsequently when I want to import some of these packages, I'll just paste it in, because I mean there's no point spending time typing it every time. So I'll say Mongoose equal to require, and then in parentheses we're just going to say Mongoose. Yeah, so that's it. Then we're going to create a schema, which is like the skeletal structure of the information we want to save in the database. So here I'll say const, and I'll call that schema user schema. Okay, and that's going to be equal to Mongoose dot capital letter schema. All right, so that's the schema we're going to create. Inside this schema, we're now going to have the properties. So we're going to have an object that contains all the properties of the stuff we want to save. Now after we've created our schema, then we're going to export it so that it can be accessed from other part of our application. So I'll come here and say const. I'll put it inside the variable first. I'll say const user, capital letter user. So every time I want to access this schema, this is what I'm going to use, this user. So user is going to be equal to mongoose dot model, and then I'm just going to specify the name of the model. So it's the user model, and then the schema that is associated with this user model is going to be our user schema. Okay, lastly, let's go ahead and export it. So I'll say module dot export plural, and that's going to be equal to, you see this user here, that's exactly what I'm exporting. So now what are the properties we want this schema to have? I'll now come here and then I'll specify the properties. So at least we know of the first one, that's the name of the user. So I'll come here and say name. You know what, let me put this object inside. Oh, I think it's okay like this. So I'll just say name, and that is going to be an object that will have some properties. So the first, I will specify the type, and I want this data type to be that of string, and we've seen this before as well. Then also I want it to be required, so this is some form of validation. So required, and we're going to have an array here. I'll set the required to true, which means that this field is required, and then if the user does not enter this field and the request successfully comes to the back end, I'm going to send back a message that please add a name. Simple as that. Now this validation is coming from the back end, but it doesn't mean that we're not still going to add validation on the front end. We're going to add validation both on the back end and on the front end. That is the safest way to build out your application, because if you don't add validation on the front end, saying that, oh, I've already added validation on the back end, what I will do is that it will be allowing your backend to receive unnecessary requests. So a user, for example, that doesn't add a name and sends and clicks on submit on your form in the front end, that request will successfully be able to pass to the back end, and that may cause strain on your server depending on how much request you're getting. So it's better to validate on the back end and on the front end. So if the user does not enter a name on the front end, right there on the front end, you would detect it and tell the user that please enter a name. All right, so let's continue. I'll add a comma here and I'll come down, and next we want an email. Okay, so I'll open that, and the email is also going to be a type of string. You know what, let me just grab these guys. So it's going to be a type of string and it's going to be required. This is going to say please add an email. All right, but then there's some other properties we want for the email. The first is that we want it to be unique. Okay, so I'll say unique IQUE, and I'll set that to true. So we want it to be unique. Also, we want to remove any space around the email. So I'll say trim and I'll set that to true. All right, then lastly, we want to also validate the email from the back end. Now we're going to validate the email using regex, and regex is not something I tell any of my students to memorize or I advise any developer to memorize. It's not actually meant to be on memorize. Just understand the basics, and whenever you need to do something, just do a quick Google. So what I got to do here is I want to match this email to make sure that it's a valid email. So match, and then I'm going to open an array. Now this array is going to contain the code that we want to use to match or to validate the email, and then if the email is not a valid email, we want to send back a message. So let me show you what I would typically do, okay? Because I'm not I'm not necessarily a genius because I'm the one creating this course. I'll come here and say regex for email JavaScript. That's all. There are various results you get. This result is fine, but I just prefer Stack Overflow. So Stack Overflow here, how can I validate an email address? Somebody has asked before. Don't stress yourself. Just go there and see the results. So you see this line of code here. This is what you can use to validate an email with regex. Okay, so I already have it in my previous code, but I can simply just copy this one because I think it's the same thing. So let me just grab it and I'll just copy that, and then I'll come back to my code here and then I'll paste that in. Voila. Then I'll add a comma and I'll come to the next line and add a message. And if the email is not valid, then I want to tell the user that please enter a valid email. Now let me specify that you don't actually need to go to Google and search for this stuff. All you just need to do is I'm going to make sure you have access to the GitHub link to the already finished project. So as I'm building this part, just go and open that same part and then just grab the code there. You know what, let me just make sure that it's exactly the same code I have in the project I've already done. So I'll just copy that and then come and paste it here just to be 100% sure. Aha, so it's the same thing. Great. So that's how we validate our email, and let me expand this once more. So next we're going to have a password field. Password, email ends here. So I'll come to the next line and then I'll just say password. Okay, it's open the object because it's going to have some properties. It's going to be a type of string, is going to be required. So let's save ourselves some time and just grab this guy, copy that, and then I'll just come here and say password. Oh, there needs to be a comma here, sorry. So comma, because we're adding another property. Then I'll change this to please add a password, like so. And then the password is going to have its own verification. And one of the verifications I want, or one of the validations I want, is I want it to have a min length. So you may want to set a min length and even a max length. But for now, I'll just set a min length and set that to 6. Yeah. Then if the user enters any password length that is less than 6, then I want to say password word must be up to 6 characters. Yeah, so that's it. Now, like I said, you can also enter a max length. You may not want people to enter maybe anything more than maybe 30. So let me say max length, and here I'll just say anything more than maybe 23, for example, 23. And the reason why is that there are some malicious strings that a user may try to send to your database, but those strings, by the time they put them together, they are usually more than a specific number. So I'm thinking that's a possible reason why people don't want that on their database. There are other reasons, especially for databases like MySQL, but this is MongoDB, a document-based data. So password must not be more than 23 characters. Okay, so that's about it for the password. Then the next thing we have is the image of the user. So here I'm just going to say photo. Aha. Then let's have our brackets, open that up. Let's save ourselves some time and just copy this type of string, and it's going to be required. I'll paste that in, and then string, something is missing here. Oh, okay. I made this square brackets instead of what's it called, curly braces. Okay, so let me just change that, curly braces. Aha, so that's it. So I'll say please enter a photo, and then now you definitely do not want to make this compulsory when users are registering. You don't want to force them to add a photo. It's bad user experience. I may not have a photo that is prepared, so what we can do in that case is to add a default. So I'll just say default, and if the user does not enter a photo, then I want to have a default. Now I already have this image that I uploaded to my one of my image accounts that you can host free images. So let me just copy that and paste it in here. Like I said, anything that you see me pasting in, that is because I assume that you're going to have access to the finished project. So you can just click that particular file and then just grab whatever it is you see me pasting in. That's as simple as that, really. Okay, so the last thing we need to add, or not the last really, I think there are like 2 more, the phone number. So let me just save some time and duplicate this, and then I'll just change this to phone, and then it's going to be a type of string. Well, I don't want to make this one required, so but I want it to have a default, and that default is going to be something. I'll just say +234 +234. That's the country code of my country, and then there needs to be a comma here. Then lastly, I would add the bio. Great, so I'm almost done with this part. So I'll just come here and then add a comma here, and then I'll just add the bio. So that's about the some information about the user. This bio, I'm going to give it a max length. So save some time and just grab this max length, copy that, because I don't want the user to be able to add like indefinite amount of. So for the default for my bio, I'll just say bio. Then let me add the max length here. So max length is going to be 250 characters. So here I'll just say bio must not be more than 250 characters. Simple. So that's about it. There's one more thing we need to do though. That is to add a timestamp on this guy here. So you see this point here where our schema closes. I'll come for before the end of this closing parenthesis, right? I'll come there, I'll add a comma, give some space, and then open another curly braces. Inside of this curly braces, I'll now specify a timestamp property. Stamp is actually plural, timestamps, because it's going to add 2 properties automatically to every data you create. It's going to add a created at property and the time you updated, so updated at. So I'll set this to true, and I think this is about it for our schema. in this model. So let's go ahead and save. Aha. So in the next video, we are going to proceed and start creating all the infrastructures we need to be able to use this model in our database. All right, see you in the next one then.